Welcome to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast, where we explore real leadership stories and strategies to inspire meaningful action and purpose. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, this podcast is here to help you lead with intent, build trust, and strengthen relationships in your organization. I'm Eric Savickas, bringing over 30 years of leadership experience from my time as a U.S. Army officer, university instructor, and now currently as a leadership coach with the fire service. Today, I'm joined by Chief Jason Caughey, Fire Chief of the Laramie County Fire Authority in Cheyenne, Wyoming. With more than 30 years in emergency services and over 2 decades as a chief officer, Chief Caughey brings deep experience and progressive insight to fire service leadership. For the past 15 years, he's led LCFA, a combination department with more than 120 members operating across 7 stations in both suburban and rural areas of Laramie County. He's a published author, international speaker, and leadership consultant who focuses on honoring tradition while leading meaningful change. Chief Caughey holds a bachelor's degree in fire science, is designated as a chief fire officer through CPSE, and is an executive fire officer graduate of the National Fire Academy. Chief Caughey, welcome to the podcast. I am so glad to have you here with me today.
Hey, Eric, thanks for the opportunity. I'm honored to be here with you.
So let's dig in here. Like I do with most guests, I want to hear, and I think our audience wants to hear about your journey in the fire service. What got you to the job first off, and then what keeps you motivated 3 decades later?
Yeah, absolutely. Taking back to 1975 or 74, the TV show Emergency. A Christmas gift that I got that year was an emergency set. It came with a little uniform, a little plastic SCBA, and a plastic truck. And that drove a passion for emergency services for me. And at the age of 14, I joined a Explorer post. Actually, 13, I joined an Explorer post that was a first aid search and rescue Explorer post. We didn't have fire ones in my area. And that continued my passion for emergency services. So the roots are deep from that original TV show.
If I don't know, we were at the Fire Leadership Challenge conference in Keystone last week, and I know you were there as well. I don't know if you saw the booth that I had, but I had the emergency TV show lunchbox, the original vintage lunchbox that I was giving away with a business card raffle. I too watched that show, and it was you see it, you go back and look at it now, and you look at the vehicles and you look at the technology and you shake your head a little bit, but it was influential.
It was, there was a lot of shows in the 70s, right? Chips, Emergency, MASH. There was just a lot of shows that really emphasized that public servant perspective without it being a soap opera. And I think that's the difference from today's emergency shows. They're a little bit soap opera-y. But those were hard-hitting, real-world, action-packed TV shows, and they really have impacted a generation of the emergency response community.
Is there a favorite current show that kind of captures it, you think, for you?
No.
No.
In fact, I avoid watching them because now through the lenses that I see the world, they're just so far-fetched that they don't do us justice. So.
Yeah, it was, I watch military shows with the same cynical lens, and I'm like, that uniform isn't right. Those tactics aren't right. I just watched a movie the other night on Netflix. It was House of Dynamite with a nuclear warhead or nuclear ICBM heading to the United States. And even those, watching people go through that, I was like, I don't know. But yeah, I can see it. Although Tacoma FD sometimes a little bit funny.
Yeah, for sure. They're entertaining, but I try to avoid them now.
So you've been the chief there in your department for 15 years. Mind blowing. Just how fast time goes by. What are some of the big things or significant changes or events that you've experienced in that time there?
Boy, a lot. And it's mind-blowing for me, too, to acknowledge 15 years here, and fortunate that the organization has tolerated me and that my board of directors continues to employ me. So grateful for that. We started with just me here, standing alone as the only full-time employee to begin with. And at the time, we had 30 to 40 volunteers, of which, if you're in the volunteer world, you know that only 20% of them really participate. And we had an escalating call volume. We had more demands for service. We had just a lot of things occurring that provided an opportunity for us to be innovative and grow an organization without any revenue. Our revenue continues to be significantly lower than our region, but we're having to be creative with how we provide that service. So through that process, we added staffing. We're up to right around 20 full-time staff and 20 college resident students and over 100 volunteers total in multiple different roles in our system. At that time, in the early 2010s, we had one staff station, or not even one staff station. We had one station that operated with some volunteers. We had a second station that had a few volunteers, and that was it. Today, we have 3 staff stations, 365 days a year. So just that growth has been really fun, but also challenging to navigate as society changes and our community changes.
As I was reading through some of the stuff that you've written, and I've heard you speak before, and we've had conversations, you often talk about honoring tradition, but still being adept at change and leading through change. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. The fire service is steeped in tradition, just like the military, just like law enforcement, like many other industries, but more so probably in the fire service. In fact, for years, for generations, we've talked about 250 years of unimpeded change in the fire service. But if you look back on it, we have changed significantly. I don't believe there's any current fire department still running a bucket brigade. So we have evolved. For me, it's important to honor those traditions. And the traditions aren't always the symbolic tradition, but more of the character of the people that we have in the fire service. I think those are the traditions that we honor. But we have to continue to evolve with technology, research, advancement, how we interact with the public, how we interact with our personnel. Without doing those things, we'll hear statements like, nobody wants to volunteer, or I can't hire firefighters, or nobody wants to work, or this generation X is horrible, or whatever it might be, because we haven't evolved in how we interact. My young career in private business was for a sporting goods hardware store in Fargo, North Dakota. And this really laid the groundwork for that honor our traditions but lead change. That sporting goods store, for some of your listeners, might have one in your area. There's 2 in Colorado now called Shield Sporting Goods.
Oh.
And I started there in college working part-time. And at that time, Shields was essentially an Ace hardware store with a little bit of sporting goods. And over the next 13 years, we grew that business into what you see today, a 250,000 square foot, 2-story sporting goods store. The irony of it is that company started in 1902 when Fred Shields sold his potato harvest and opened the first mercantile, a little small town mercantile in Sabin, Minnesota. And you think about that evolution, and nothing about Shields today looks like that 1902 store, except for the service, the innovative, the commitment, the vision of providing excellent customer service to the community. And I think the fire service is the same thing. And we run our organization the same way to say, we have to be innovative, but still respect and honor our former traditions. But we have to look for new ways to serve our members better, who then serve our community better. So that's the principle behind it. Whether we're successful, I don't know, but we continue to push towards that principle.
So what do you think causes folks to want to drag their feet potentially, or not want to get on board with change and just simply say, well, this is the way we've always done it, and we got to stick with that, even though, like, it's so often said that, the only constant is change. Well, if that's the case, and I've said this before, why aren't we better at it by now? Right? Why
Yeah,
aren't we used to it by now?
I think it's 2 parts, Eric, and it's a great question. I think one, we're not training leaders to think that way. We're training leaders to be managers, to follow policies, NFPA policy, OSHA policy. We're, the rule book, right? We're following a rule book instead of teaching them to think and create and evolve. So that's one part. But the main second part is fear. You don't ever want to not know what you don't know, right? And I think good leaders, and I think if you look at your leadership experience in the military, your best leaders weren't experts in everything, but they knew enough to know that there's somebody smarter and somebody doing something better, and to embrace that. And I think confidence and fear work hand in
Hmm.
hand to drive change. So if you're not confident enough to let somebody else know more, you're going to resist change. And if you're not confident and strong enough to accept new technologies, you'll resist change. And I'll give you a little example. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, one of my deputy chiefs came to me with e-battery extrication equipment, which is now common. But 14 years ago, that was new. And my initial reaction was, let's try one set, but let's keep the old standby on the apparatus for when that battery stuff fails. When we went to purchase our second generation of that battery powered tools, we recognized that for 7 years, we never touched the original old
Hmm.
school stuff. But it was my fear of failure on a scene caused by that new technology instead of embracing it. So fast forward to about 6 years ago, we started putting battery powered saws and chainsaws and fans and all these things on our apparatus. They joked with me to say, are we going to have to keep the old stuff just in case? And I said, absolutely not. We learned our lesson. We have to trust a little bit, trust and verify, but trust technology is going to continue to work for us into the future.
Yeah, no, it's good. And I like what you said about fear, right? Like sometimes people, it's a real thing, and they say that someone adopting change follows the Kubler-Ross death and dying model, right? Where you got the denial and then the
Mm-hmm.
bargaining and you leading to acceptance, et cetera. And it's very much through the same thing that you experience through change. But people would fear, like, well, what does this mean for me, right? Do I suddenly get exposed as not being a guy that is good with technology? Or do I get put out on a limb where now my knowledge is tested, where I was comfortable before doing the thing? Now people are going to see right through me, maybe. But it's interesting. I think it's John Cotter in one of his books says, people really have to feel the change before they can do it, right? You can present them with all the spreadsheets, all the data, all of the rational reasons why it makes sense. But until you can appeal to them in a way that it really hits them, like take for example, if I get a sign on my front door that says, "Hey, Eric, you got to mow your lawn because you're out of tolerance for the HOA." Now, thankfully, I don't have an HOA here, but if that were the case, right, I'd be like, "Hell no, screw the HOA. I'm not doing it. My lawn is fine." But if my neighbor came to me and said, "Hey, let's make a bet. Who's going to have the best lawn this season?" Right? And there'll be a bottle of bourbon at the end as a prize. That'll strike me in something that I feel, and then I'll be more apt to do the thing, right? Versus just being told to do it.
Yeah, interesting, Eric. Over the years, we've been instrumental in looking at research for fire dynamics and fire behavior, which impacts the tactics that we use. And we do some techniques here that are a little different than the rest of the United States in particular. And when we started looking at that, we looked at the world and said, how does the world fight fire? And it was great. Got to travel the world and research those things, but I couldn't get anybody to buy into it until we started conducting the same test to produce the same results here in our organization. And when they could smell it, feel it, taste it, not literally, but when they could experience that new technology, that different technology or a different approach, they could have ownership in it, because then they could say it worked in our neighborhood right here at our street level. And so I think when we look at change, it's important to recognize that there has to be an emotional connection to that
Mhm.
change, and it has to come from the perspective of it works here in our neck of the woods. And that goes with all parts of change throughout your organization.
Right. And the conditions that you set have to show that the change is better or going to be better than the current state, right? Like
Yeah.
people often say, well, they use the example of a burning platform, right? You're never going to leap off the top of the burning platform to and risk yourself like Mark Wahlberg on top
Yeah.
of the Deepwater Horizon, right? When he jumped
Right.
off of that thing. You're not going to risk yourself unless you can see that it's going to be better putting yourself out there and doing the thing.
Yeah, and the irony of that, Eric, is as a leader, once you start to have some successes there, right? The organization starts to evolve and starts to experience successful change. They start to trust you more when newer concepts or
Mm,
changes come down the line. So it takes less work to evolve. So it's almost like a snowball going down a hill.
sure.
Once you get some successes going, they're more forgiving of the next change coming their way. So it just takes work. It takes work as a leader to create those opportunities for them to see the benefits for themselves and also the organization.
Definitely, definitely. Speak to me or talk to me about this resident firefighter program that you have there. Was that something, because we're talking about change, was that something that you saw potentially a unique opportunity to put into place and then add that to your department, or was that there before your time?
No, we started it out of necessity, and we copied and took pieces from other programs around the country that I had been experienced or exposed to. My first year here, that first 2 weeks, I did 9 CPRs by myself waiting for an engine company to arrive. So 15
Uh,
minutes because it was a traditional volunteer model. And I said, something's got to change. I need to create staffing, but I didn't have cash for salaries. I couldn't raise the budget, couldn't change the budget. So I started with one college student that happened to be an explorer in our system that was graduating high school, and that was Sean Gwynn. He's now with um, Scotts Bluff Fire Department. Started with one and started the benefit, and now we're up to 20. Now through that process is when I introduced the concept. Of course, the traditional mindset folks says you can't have 18, 19-year-old kids unsupervised running apparatus, et cetera, et cetera. I said, funny, I think the U.S. military does it every day, 23 and 24-year-old supervisors. So there's an opportunity for us to do that. They said, well, they're going to wreck your equipment. I said, well, they can't do any worse than our experienced folks because I have 50-year-olds that are crashing the apparatus just as much as the 18-year-olds. So it was changing a mindset that if we empower those young folks and we provide them training and we give them guidance, yep, there's going to be some hiccups with young folks, but it's going to give us faster and better service to our community out the door than what we're currently doing.
Surprisingly, in the military, they don't let the officers like me touch the equipment. They say, "Sir, you're going to break something. You need to back away from that thing."
Yep. Yep.
So
Exactly.
so tell me about how this works. So you get folks in there, and are they in a cohort group that's all on the same timeline, or do they come and go? They live there like full time. What do you provide for them? Is there any exchange in, like, you're obviously giving them training and an opportunity for a career, but how does it all work?
Yeah. So I wish we could have cohorts, but unfortunately, because of the nature of young folks, we accept applications as needed, and then we capture 2, 3, 4, up to 6 or 8 applications at one time, interview them, and then start them through an academy. We provide housing for them, so they live in the buildings in a dorm room, just like a college dorm. We provide annual or monthly food stipend for them as a team, so they learn some budgeting. They get
Mm.
X dollars amount every month that they have to buy from Walmart, and we monitor what they're buying. So they have a budget, so they learn some household skills there for their future. In return, we ask them to work shifts. They work 24 on shift schedule. They have to be enrolled in college, and so we pay their college tuition if they get a C average or higher. So we reimburse that. We have a safer grant that provides that opportunity for them. So all in all, they get a lot of life skills through the process. And in return, we get staffing in our apparatus that are able to respond immediately. Over the decade, we've added full-time staff to augment that supervisory role on those apparatus and in those stations, just to give guidance to them so that they don't feel like they're just here free willy. But it's grown and it continues to grow. It's a huge benefit for us. I originally did it as a Band-Aid, as a gap filler for a need, and now it's become a very valuable component of our organization as we grow.
It sounds awesome, and I'm wondering if a 54-year-old former artillery officer could potentially apply. Although there's some knee pain and some back pain and some baggage that comes with that. Would you be open to that?
of course, we'd be open to it. The question is, can you handle being around 18 and 19-year-old men and women for
I don't know.
24/7,
I don't
365?
know if I could keep up, right? It's a young person's game.
I had a gentleman from California in his mid-30s that was a CPA, had been very successful in California as a certified public accountant, say, "I want to do something more valuable with my life. I've made enough money to do this." He came and lived in his mid-30s in our dorm program for a year and a half, got his degree in associates in fire science, and now is a Denver Metro firefighter. He's living out his best life through those experiences.
It would certainly help me with what I do with fire service coaching now, right? I go
Yeah,
in there and I say stuff that I have no idea what I'm talking about the alpha side of a building or pulling the pre-connect or whatever. That's the
sure.
limit of my knowledge.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little. As I had mentioned, we were at the Fire Leadership Challenge Conference hosted by the Colorado State Chiefs and DFPC and Professional Firefighters Organization. Great conference. And you and three other co-presenters gave a keynote presentation on commanding the balance, finding the line between being aggressive and being safe. And by the way, I told one of your co-presenters, Luke Hopkins from a Mountain
Mhm.
View Fire, who did an amazing job. I said that, and I wasn't blowing smoke here. I said in the 6 years that I've been at the conference, that was one of the most engaging presentations that I had witnessed because it was very conversational. It connected with the audience. It was topical, and you weren't preaching at us; you were talking with us, and so I thought that that was great. So kudos to you for that. What did you hope to convey when you were planning out that keynote, and then how did it feel in execution?
Yeah, absolutely. So the data stems from a survey conducted by Fire Rescue One on what firefighters want. And last year they did it on aggressive versus safe. And obviously it's a hot topic on social media and in the fire service. And so in that there was a lot of data to disseminate through there. What we wanted to do is capture a conversation around a kitchen table that occurs in every fire station in America about being aggressive or being safe, and can they coexist? And so we tried to take that concept for the keynote to say, let's have a conversation with a couple chief officers, a line officer, and myself to facilitate that. And what would that look like? And can we have a realistic conversation about, are we aggressive, and how do we be safe while being aggressive? The data from that survey, about 1,300 participants, really identified that most organizations feel that they take the right safety precautions, but still are aggressive. And so it really takes the wind out of the sail of we're one or the other. We really can be both. And from the conversations we had at the kitchen table on stage that day, it really is identifying what areas you need to manage on safety, like wearing seatbelts or wearing your PPE, the things that you can physically manage versus the stuff you can't manage, which is the unknowns of an evolving event or an incident. And if you think back to your military career also, Eric, you know that there are things that you get to control, right? Wearing the proper gear, being prepared mentally, being trained, being proficient with your skill set, knowing how to use your weapon, knowing how to use your artillery, etc. But there's things you can't control, which is the
Right.
unknown of the enemy. And that's our same environment that we operate in those fire grounds. We know from the sidewalk to the front door, everything before that moment I can control. Once I break that front door, the only thing I have in control for is my knowledge, my expertise, my training, my proficiency with my tools. That's what I can control. The environment I'm in, I can't. So
Right.
let's do what we can do to be safe, but yet still be aggressive. And let's not be reckless. I think John Oates, Chief Oates out of Connecticut, had a best line of the day, which was the difference between aggressive and reckless is stitches. The damage you do to yourself during an incident becomes reckless. So if you get hurt, if you have to have stitches, if you get knocked out, you were probably reckless. You probably weren't being aggressive anymore.
Yeah, and such great points in that conversation. And you're right, right? A lot of people think like safety is holding us back from doing what we need to do, but it's really an enabler, right?
Yeah.
By understanding and then being able to mitigate risks and take all of that into account, come up with a plan, you can be more aggressive in a way that I'm doing this safely, or I'm doing this that it will minimize the risks. I thought it was, you mentioned Chief Oates. I think he said what there are three fundamental things in the fire service that'll never change, and number three was that fire engines are red. And I was
Right.
sitting next to the Denver chief, and he shook his head. But I thought that was funny. How do you think the audience took it, and by the questions that you were asked, or how they were kind of picking up what you guys were putting down?
It's always hard judge a lot of those presentations by how many people get up and leave throughout it. And I couldn't see the whole audience because it's a very large facility. But for the most part, I didn't see a lot of people getting up and leaving. And that's usually a good sign for us.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and I'm sure you got a lot of good comments
Yeah. Yeah.
afterwards.
It's interesting when we look at aggressive versus safe, and you nailed it, Eric, that not only being safe provides us more opportunity to be aggressive, I would also strongly emphasize that technology research advancements also allow us to be more aggressive. And so a lot of times we resist new research, like if UL or other research institutes come out with new information, we resist it because we fear that we're not going to be as aggressive. That's not actually the case. New research and technology actually allows us to operate better. And I'm going to give you one simple little piece of that is our protective clothing allows us to operate deeper inside of a structure than it ever has.
Hmm.
Just that simple piece of safety equipment has provided us to be more aggressive. So when we start to argue about research and technology and hitting it hard from the yard or piercing it, recognize that your PPE is already giving you an advantage. Why not embrace the other technologies to give you even additional advantages in being aggressive?
And I think if I'm remembering correctly, you were mentioning that PPE is how it is gotten to a level that is so safe, it might give us, in some cases, a false sense of confidence. And as I was sitting there in the audience, I was resonating with how, like maybe on the football field, right? Like the safety of all that gear causes those players to collide at a velocity that was, never the case years ago, and almost more harmful now, right? So like maybe people in the
Mhm.
fire service, because of that gear, are putting themselves in riskier situations. Is that what you were trying to say?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, and it's an example that I actually use. Two examples. One, look at what a fighter pilot wears today for technology that allows them to go Mach 3 or Mach 10 or whatever, how fast they go, versus a fighter pilot in World War II,
Hmm.
right? Leather jacket, leather helmet with earmuffs and a Piper Cub or whatever it might have been. Think about football. If you tried to play in the NFL today wearing a 1960 or 1970 football uniform, would you feel safe? I
Right.
wouldn't, because the new technology, the advancements in training, the advancements in physical fitness, the advancements in strength training, let alone the advancements in helmet technology, shoulder pad technology, has provided those athletes to be more impactful than they ever were 50 years ago. And the fire service is the same way. Our gear, our SCBAs, our PPE, our hose design, our nozzle designs, our engine apparatus provide us to extend inside the threat zone further than we ever could, providing us not even a realistic feeling of what the environment we're in until it's too late. So again, technology is great, but we have to recognize that it's putting us in places that we never were designed to be put in.
I I probably have mentioned this before on the podcast, but I was doing training with a department, it was actually an academy down in Ignacio, down in the Four
Mhm.
Corners, and they put me in an SCBA and turnout gear and inside the tower for a live burn, and I was like, "Holy crap!" Right? Like I know I wasn't at risk, but you could feel it on your neck and your wrists, your shoulders, where the straps are. And I was like, this is wild. Like and I've been in some stuff with the military, but that environment is crazy in there.
You think about 1970s, going back to Emergency, the TV show, they had day boots and long coats, totally different atmosphere that they were experiencing than what we are experiencing today.
Yeah. So this month, focusing with some of my social media and blog posts and stuff on coaching and giving feedback. I think it's such a game changer if leaders take on a coaching mindset, right? Too often, and I was speaking to this the other day in a class I was giving. Too often, as a leader, it's so easy to give advice, right? We've been there, done that. Someone sticks their head in your office or whatever, grabs you and says, "Hey, Lieutenant, there's something wrong with the check engine lights on the apparatus or some other issue." Too easy to be like, "Okay, call maintenance or put a work order in or do whatever the process is." But what if instead we resisted that temptation to give advice all the time, and instead we said, "Tell me what you're going to do, or what's your plan, or what options do you have? And let's talk through this. And let me ask you some questions and have a conversation." I know that takes more time, but we create an environment by doing that where people have buy-in and they're thinking through problems and they're understanding how you compare potential solutions and you pick the best one and all of that stuff. How do you see coaching as in your role as chief and then for the rest of the leaders in your department?
It's one of the most important things we do. And so we actually call our instructors coaches instead of instructors. We think there's a physical difference, both physiologically and emotionally, when you call them a coach versus an instructor. Instructors tend to want to show. So they hold the tool, they demonstrate how good they are with it, where coaches generally facilitate the individual's performance. If you think about a basketball coach on the sideline, he can't shoot the free throws, but
Right.
he's running up and down that court, talking, encouraging, guiding, scolding, all those pieces. And the same thing is for us as leaders, we have to be able to do that. And you hit a point there, Eric. If we coach instead of just tell, we grow the vastness of our organization, our people. So an example, I have a fleet manager. Again, we're a small organization and we struggle with trying to get stuff done. And he's doing great work, but he's also overwhelmed, right? The natural thing for our members to do today is when something's broken is just to fill out the request and put it on the spreadsheet that this needs to be repaired. Because we're not facilitating teaching them how to repair some of those things. So the other day, I was walking through the bay and I see a chainsaw laying on the floor and I said, "What's the chainsaw there for?" I asked the on-shift crew. And they're like, "Oh, the fleet manager is going to fix that. He said he'll get back to it. It was broken this morning during truck checks." I said, "What's wrong with it?" "Well, the chain fell off." We can fix that. Come on, let's go. And so we ask him, "Okay, let's talk about it. What happened? How does it work? Why is the chain on there? How does it?" And we went through, and 15 minutes later, they're able to put the chain back on. They also know a little bit more about the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Next time that happens, guess what? They should be able to fix it
They
versus
got the
just taking
tools
that
then.
easy route of filling out the form and being done with it, washing their hands of it. We want to create empowered thinking individuals, not only firefighters, powerful, empowered thinking individuals. We want people seeing what needs to be done instead of being waiting to be told what is to be done. I'd
Yeah.
rather have 40 people that see the need to fix something or adjust something or pick something up than having 40 people walk by it like it's just the way it is, right? Not my responsibility. So coaching creates that opportunity. And if you don't think coaching is important, look at Alabama football today. For the last decade, Alabama, underneath the guidance of Nick Saban, has been the best college football team in the country. Nick Saban retires, a new football coach that's highly capable comes into that system, and they have struggled. It's about coaching. It's about
Right.
leadership and vision. And I'm sure that person is outstanding X's and O's on the chalkboard with the football players, but he doesn't have the ability to assemble that team, motivate that team, grow that team, coach that team to success. And that takes work. And
Yeah.
and coaching's important.
And it creates light bulb moments for people where they can do the thing that they've been struggling to do, or they can figure out the problem that they're faced with. I was thinking, because someone asked, I was in a session and someone was asking what was a coaching moment that you remember that was impactful. And even as the instructor, I was thinking through it. And I had a business coach that I had hired myself at one point, and she asked me, she said, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And it wasn't like, fear of going into a burning building. It wasn't a physical fear. It was just me being frozen in indecision. And as soon as she asked that question, what would you do if you weren't afraid? I was like, well, obviously, if I wasn't afraid, I would do A and I would do B and I'd follow that with C. And she just looked at me and said, well, why don't you do it? Right.
Right.
And it was that like clarity that I had gotten myself in this frozen indecision state, that it made all the difference. And so those are the moments. And leaders, obviously, some will push back and say, well, I don't have time for that. I just need to get the stuff done. Same thing with leaders intent, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about leaders intent, this isn't a discussion about leaders intent, but they'll convince themselves that I don't have time to give you the reason why, or I don't have time to describe the desired outcome. I just need you to do the thing. Right. But if we're think of it as an investment, right? As leaders, we're investing in everything we do. And that investment, even though it may take a little bit more time in the moment for coaching versus mentoring versus advising, that investment is going to have such a bigger ROI.
We don't realize it. All of us as leaders have moments where we screw up and fail. In fact, I go to bed every night thinking about all the failures I did that day, and we're probably harder on ourselves than our crews and our community ever will be. And that's probably a fault of leaders. But you don't have time not to coach and mentor. If I tried to run this organization today the way I did in 2011, where I was the only person standing here, it would fail miserably. You have to be able to mentor, coach, guide, finesse the staff around you, hold them accountable when need to, praise them when need to, coach them when needed to, um, redirect them when needed to. And a lot of the concepts come back to being able to see. A lot of times as leaders and as people, we don't see what's in front of us because it becomes normal. And good leaders, good coaches, good developers see those challenges in front of them. They see the things that need to be done, and then they find out a way to get them done. And that, I think, is one of the keys to success as a leader and as a coach.
Related to that, coaching and how powerful it is, just in general, giving people feedback, letting them know how they're doing, and having difficult conversations with folks. You mentioned redirecting behavior. How do you see it, Chief, if you have somebody that isn't meeting the standard or has a behavior that needs to be addressed specifically? Do you have maybe a secret sauce or a tactic or technique that you use to look them in the eye and let them know, like, this isn't it?
I probably fail at as much as any. In fact, a little over a year ago, I had an incident with an individual which I identified in my head that I needed to take action on. Um, I didn't take action on it as fast as I should have, which then it blossomed into a greater problem.
Hmm.
And so that was a lesson for me personally. But I think part of it is just having relationship with your people and being able to have those open dialogues. We have a formal process, obviously, when somebody crosses that line where now we have to take action formally with them. But informally, it's the conversation. It's the, how are you doing? Where are you at? What are you looking at? How can we do this better? How can I help you? I think those are important for us when we have those difficult conversations that need to be happening. On the flip side, the easy ones are the violations, right? We just ended a member here a couple weeks ago. Those are easy. They really are. When they do something so terrible that you're forced to take action, those are the easy ones. So my advice to folks is, one, build the relationship so you can have those conversations before they get to the real serious one. So
Right.
all along, be having that conversation. Where are you at? How are you doing? How can I help you? I think those are three key words or questions that you can help prevent from having those really difficult conversations. Was, now we have to take action. Now we got to put you on a disciplinary plan. Now we have to do these other things. Um, start early in that process.
Yeah, and you're exactly right about having those conversations. That's really one of the most important pieces to it. Too often, young leaders or any leader really, they convince themselves that I see my crew every day. We live with each other for 48 hours at a time. They know how they're doing in my eyes. When really they don't, right? Like, they know when you say good job, and you do, people may say good job all the time, and they know in the bay when, if they do this particular task not right and they get corrected on it or adjusted, that then they know that. But have you ever sat them down and said, this is how I think you're doing overall? If there were 10 people here, you're number 8 out of 10, or here are the things that I think you could do better. I'm a huge advocate, and I know it isn't fire service culture, but I think the PIP form, or however you would organize, I know there's different forms for it. I think that's a great tool for everybody all the time. Why not document in a conversation, here are the things I think we can work on, and here's how I'm going to help you in accountability and give you the tools that you need to be successful, and let's write it down and put a plan together, right? Like, who?
These are them right there. October is review month for us, and we do a performance review. And it's just an opportunity for us to look at them as individuals and for them to also share their goals and aspirations. It is. It's not always comfortable, but
Sure.
they're important to do. Absolutely.
Even if uncomfortable, do you think that there's a single person in your organization, or a single person in any organization, fire or otherwise, that says, I would rather not know how I'm doing, right? Like, I don't think it's human nature, right? You'd rather know, good or bad, tell me, then
Yeah.
at least I know. Like, who doesn't want to know?
Yeah, and it gives you an opportunity to create goals. And you think about the fire service, we don't give a lot of goals. Uh, you know, we expect you to show up, work your shift, respond out in a timely fashion, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens if we start driving goals for them? What are your goals? Where do you want to be in 5 years and 10 years? And they might even say, well, I don't even know. I guess the path is engineer to company officer. So no, no, no. Think broader. Do you want to be fire chief? Do you want to be a division chief? Do you want to be involved in tech rescue? We should be creating goals for them to obtain so that they
Yeah.
can grow as individuals in our organization.
But how often, instead of talking about long-term goals and what do you think about being a company officer someday or even higher, the conversation looks more like, hey, you need to stay in your lane and focus on being a firefighter right now. Right. And that
Yeah.
just, it's deflating. Like, I get it. You got to focus on your job. You got to be proficient in it. But why not have conversations about future?
Eric, you're hitting on something that I think private business does much better than we do. A few years ago, I was at a hotel in Fort Collins for a conference. It was a fire conference, and in the lobby was a job fair for engineers. We were right next to CSU's campus. And I'm thinking to myself, holy smokes, we're missing an opportunity. Here, the fire service is struggling to attract volunteers, struggling to attract career people. And here we have highly educated engineers that probably never even considered the fire service. Why wouldn't we offer them, hey, you can go get your license in engineering and still volunteer with the fire service? Ever think about that? Because they hadn't thought about it. So I think that we as a fire service need to stop looking at years of service as promotional capabilities. We need to start looking at capabilities. Private business does it. Doesn't matter if you've been on 1 or 3 years in a private business. If you're performing, you're going to get noticed. We
Mhm.
need to do a better job of not pigeonholing our personnel into this is how we've always done it. If you're a hard charger and working hard and growing and being talented and leading, then we should give you those opportunities regardless of how long you've been in the system.
Yep, I definitely agree. So as we start to wind down our conversation, and it's been great, and I appreciate all the insight and sharing ideas with you. What do you have coming up for your department? Either initiatives or changes, as we've been talking about, or things that are on the horizon that you're excited about?
Yeah, a lot. We were just awarded a SAFER grant for 4 additional hires, which is going to change the dynamic of our organization. So after the first of the year, we have that rolling. Recently, we just added Station 75 online, which is our third staff station, which changes the dynamic. We're working with our neighbors right now in closest unit, which changes the dynamic. So those are the tangible pieces. The non-tangible are recreating and reinforcing our vision with State of the Union addresses to our members. Where are we going? Where have we been? How are we getting there? Making sure that we're communicating that with them for the next 3, 5, and 10 years so that they know why we're doing what we're doing and so they feel a part of why and what we're doing. Finally, it's about our people. So reinforcing our life skills. We have a life skills program that does everything from cooking classes to tax preparation to marriage counseling to how to repair or change your oil on your car. Reinforcing that life skills program to give value back to our members who participate with us, that give us value to our community. So reinforcing the people side of our organization. So we're not just always focused on pulling hoses and flowing water, which is important, but focusing also on that social side of it to give them value that they can also use in their personal life. So those are kind of where we're headed and the fun stuff on the horizon for us.
All right. Last question for you, Chief. You get in the DeLorean, go back 15 years when you first took charge in your role as chief of the department. What advice would you give yourself?
This is a question that comes up once in a while, and it took me years to recognize the importance of gaining perspective and building relationships. And to young firefighters, which I get the opportunity to deal with a lot today, I tell them take advantage of every opportunity that you can grasp hold of to gain perspective and grow as an individual. It's easy to be the expert in your community. It's hard to expose what you don't know by seeking perspective outside of your community. So for me, it took us about 10 years for me to start to explore the rest of the region and the rest of the world as far as the fire service goes. I would challenge, if I could go back today, I would challenge myself to gain that perspective early on because I think it made me a more well-rounded individual and continues to impact how I see our organization and the community.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I was just thinking about something similar the other day. In the military, I always thought, I have the unit to my left, unit to my right. They're doing their jobs. I'm doing my job. I don't necessarily need to network or build relationships for us all to do our jobs. But why not? Right? Why not have a relationship here and strengthen another one here and network here? There's nothing shady about it. You're not trying to do anything in terms of gaining accolades or maneuvering to leverage people in a shady way. You're doing it because we're all in this together, right? Someone's got an idea over here, someone's doing something great over there. Why not all collectively share some of those thoughts and ideas and collaborate? So I think that's awesome. Well, Jason, thanks so much for being with me today and sharing these ideas. I always enjoy talking to you and hearing you speak, and this was a privilege for me to get to have you on the podcast here. Thank you as well for your contributions to the fire service and leading at the local, state, international levels. Keep up the great work with your department and all the endeavors that you're doing, and keep protecting our communities because we certainly appreciate that. For our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team or anyone that you might find that benefits from these leadership takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast and leave a review on your favorite platform. And for more leadership resources and tools, visit convergentimpact.com. And as always, until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and keep setting the example.